Carli and Deanna talking about the drama.
Hello.
This is Dorina
and Deanna
with Bledsoe Empower. Welcome back to our podcast, Empower El Mundo. We are your former collegiate athletes, now trained mental health counselors.
Yes, on this podcast, you can expect to hear about all things total wellness. That is going to include physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual connections. So make sure to tune in every single week because we'll be here.
And we're on all social media platforms, so make sure you follow us and subscribe to Empower El Mundo. Let's get into it.
Let's go. Hello.
Hello.
We are back.
Oh.
Dorina looks a little different.
Listen.
All right, you guys, we are back with another episode of Empower Up Podcast. If you are watching this on YouTube, then you know that my co-host Dorina is not here. But she will be back next week, so stay tuned because we'll be able to get all of her knowledge, all of her insight. But in place of her today, we've also got a dope licensed counselor in lieu of her position, Carli Kilborn.
Hello.
What up?
Great to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So Carli is also a licensed counselor in the state of Arizona, like myself, as well as Dorina. She is specializing in trauma. So there's a lot that goes into trauma, how those type of experiences manifest within your body, your mental illnesses, your physical illnesses, all of that. So we are going to be tapping into her knowledge of what she knows about that. And really, today is going to be a focus on the mind-body connection. So what we've been doing now that we've launched our Empowered as Fuck journal, if you guys haven't gotten it yet, go get it. It's on our website at www.bledsoeempower.com. You can also click the link in my bio at Deanna Bledsoe and Dorina's bio at Dorina Bledsoe, and you will find it there. It's limited, so we've only got a couple left. If you haven't gotten yours yet, go snag it. It'll be worth it.
I was going to say, what are you doing if you haven't gotten it yet? Just wondering.
Just obviously not caring about you, not
Just
trying to be
not
empowered.
to get empowered? Yeah.
Just not living the right way, I guess. No judgment, but also judgment. No, but what we're doing with this series of podcasts is we are really diving into the 5 areas of life that impact your total well-being and how empowered and fulfilled you are each day stepping into it. So the first section of our guided journal is the mind-body connection. Your world starts with you. And so that is what Carli and I are going to be diving into, and why, when people say mind-body connection, what does it mean? Why is it important? What happens if I don't specifically create time for that? So all of like the ugliness that goes within it, with not paying attention to it, and how you can then create that type of space, because it essentially creates inner peace, which is the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive in. Carli,
Let's do it.
what the heck is a mind-body connection?
What is it?
What is it?
Mind, body. They connect. No, I'm just kidding.
Facts.
No. Facts. That's where we start. But that's not all. Mind-body connection is basically how your mind influences your body, and then in turn, how your body influences your mind. They are super interconnected. Our thoughts become things. You guys have probably heard that before. That's a very oversimplified way to understand it. There's a lot of good ways to, I guess, think about that. Your energy is where your attention, or your attention is where your energy goes.
Yeah. I think that it's all of that. And essentially, the mind-body connection is the belief that your thoughts, feelings, and emotions impact your physical well-being as well as physical illnesses. So what you say and the language you use internally impacts how alive you feel within your body. Do you pay attention to those thoughts, or Do you act like whatever uncomfortable emotions you experience like they didn't happen? Is there a level of avoidance in terms of how much awareness you have around that? Your body's always going to tell you exactly how you feel, but there's a level of consciousness and awareness that is extremely valuable for us to have in being able to tell what our body is saying to us. So,
Intuition.
Facts. Yeah. And intuition is, how would you describe intuition?
I know. I think, well, that's what made me think of it, is you saying awareness. I mean, we can wake up in the morning and feel achy or have a headache or, something's going on with our body, even if we don't know what it is and it doesn't feel right. But it's like the ability to think about and analyze those ailments in our body and connect that to things that are going on in our mind or in our life. I mean, that's kind of what intuition is, right? Like the ability to look past the obvious.
Yeah. I would say so. And I think that maybe for people who have a connection to like a spiritual, have a spiritual connection or even a connection to a higher power, intuition could be them hearing that higher power influence what that experience is that they're having. So to dive into a little bit more of like the ailments that you may be feeling within your body, that is a big problem of avoiding the mind and body and connecting those two major parts of your body, of your life experience. So a couple of examples of what happens to your physical experience when you're not intentional about stimulating your mind and your brain and stimulating your body is mental illnesses that can develop over time. For example, if you have a life that you've experienced a lot of trauma, and even as a child, if it's trauma that you're not responsible for, and really all trauma you're not really responsible for, but if you never address it, then over time the trauma, it doesn't subside because there's a lack of acknowledgement. It's going to show up in your life physically and mentally. So that can show up as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That can show up as depression. That can show up as extreme anxiety. And those are just some of the physical illnesses that can really develop over time if trauma is not being addressed and you're not taking care of your mental.
And even, things as serious as like heart disease, cancer, there's all kinds of experiments being done. But even things as serious as that can be linked to trauma because of increased stress. Cortisol, not to get too like technical, but
get into it.
Adrenaline, when those are increased in our bodies, it's hard on our bodies. And so, things even as serious as that, can be a result from chronic stress. No good, no bueno.
And you know what I think that is too, with like kind of just tapping into like what chemically happens to you. When we experience, I just stuck all in my tooth. When we experience high levels of stress, or when we're going through a really traumatic moment, our body goes into fight or flight. So our brain and our physical experience is acting in a way of survival. So all of the hormones, all of the cortisol, all of the adrenaline is going into fight whatever harm is in front of me, or I need to flight, I need to flee, I need to get out of there. And so our body's stress response is for protection. And with that being true, our body comes down from that stress response. And if we're not intentional about tending to those types of hormones that are now all within our body by releasing those through physical movement, through verbal expression, then that stress response stays within you. And so there's such a value in knowing how to respond in those stressful moments, and then also knowing how to get all of that anxiety and fight or flight hormones out of your body so that you can move on to the next moment, because you can't stay at a high level of stress forever. That's really when a lot of those different diseases can come into play, and mental illnesses.
Yeah. And that's essentially, I mean, that's kind of the effect that trauma can have on the body, is keeping you in that overstimulated state so that you are always reactive. You know, the natural progression of how our brain works is like we encounter something, right? A stimuli or a trigger. And that happens. It goes through our amygdala. I think this is so fascinating because we started talking about this the other day, but I couldn't really.
Hijack.
Yes, the amygdala hijack. We'll call her Amy.
I like that.
Amy, the amygdala.
Amy comes through.
So
Amy will save you.
Amy's in a clutch, right? But like, if Amy is overstimulated, right? So if you're triggered by something, the job of Amy, the amygdala, is to assess that stimuli or that trigger for fear. And so if fear is detected, you know, survival mode, fight or flight happens. But someone who experienced trauma, whether it was 20 years ago, whether it was last week, I mean, you know, that trauma creates like a neural pathway, a new neural pathway. And so it teaches the brain, it teaches Amy to hold that fear response and to hold it for a longer than it should. Because what it should do is it should, you know, we see something, it goes through the amygdala, and then it goes through to the prefrontal cortex, which is like executive decision making, planning. So when trauma happens and we encounter a trigger, it gets stuck in the amygdala, which is overstimulated and a reactive state. So that's why people with PTSD, they stay there. They're like stuck in that state. They can't move into like reasoning and logic.
Because they stay in the fight or flight. I think that's so facts. And it's in a lot of that is like terminology that happens within the brain. So if you like to nerd out like we do, it's extremely fascinating because your brain and your body is created to protect you. And so sometimes one way to think about trauma is like big T trauma and little t trauma. And so big T trauma are those big events that happen in your life that make a lot of sense as to why it would impact you negatively. For an example, your parent passing away or a dear friend passing away in a really extreme way in a house fire that you're there for. That's a massive big T trauma interaction. Little T trauma can be those small moments that cause your body to respond in a way of stress or fight or flight. For example, when you're driving on the freeway and the person in front of you slams on their brakes, and 2 years ago somebody in front of you slammed on their brakes and you rear-ended them and it was an extremely impactful moment, or if it wasn't. But that type of interaction and seeing the car in front of you slam on their brakes, even if you don't hit them, that little T response can make you tighten up, your chest gets really tight, and it feels like your breathing starts to get really shallow. And that's because it's the neurotransmitters that have created that neural pathway of, okay, I remember last time the car in front of me slammed on their brakes, I hit them, and my head slammed into the steering wheel. Even if that doesn't happen, if you don't address that type of response, those neural pathways are still within your brain. So that response is going to happen naturally.
Mm-hmm. Neurons that fire together, wire together.
Hello, somebody.
Hello.
This podcast is so clinical.
We like to rhyme. I know. We really went on a trauma tangent there, but
we do enjoy it. Okay, so what would you say would be an effective way for somebody to stimulate their mind? How can you do that? What does that even mean?
There's so many ways that you can do that. And I think one major way to stimulate your mind is to get movement in your body, right? So bringing it back to that mind-body connection. And your mind, you know, you can talk yourself out of so many things, right? I think we're going to touch on that in a little bit. But like, if you can get up and move and get past those excuses, you're basically making a choice to get uncomfortable, right? And so that's kind of a way for you to, I guess, stimulate your mind is stimulating your body. And in turn, it's like a reciprocal cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. What you say to yourself matters, and what you do with your body matters. It's totally cyclical. Cyclical?
Yeah, that's a word.
Cyclical.
Nice.
Thank you. So, one thing I want to mention, if you're an individual well, I'll give an example. So I had a client years ago, high levels of anxiety, high levels of anxiety, was not able to sit in her emotions. Like, one way that we would really practice mental stimulation and just calmness was to practice yoga. But she had such high levels of anxiety, like sitting still was so hard for her to do because it's the racing and ruminating thoughts that are just like on replay and repeated in her brain. Prevented her from being able to like sit still and just enjoy feeling in her body. So what would you say to somebody who does experience high levels of anxiety and they are not able to just like sit still within their body? What would be another way that they could stimulate themselves?
Right. Well, yoga is huge for that. I mean, yoga is huge for mind-body connection because there's like purpose behind the movements. And so basically what you're doing with that, it's like any activity that allows you to, you know, breathing exercises, allows you to recognize, hey, you know, I stopped thinking about my breath. I'm going to recognize that and become aware of it. And I'm not going to judge myself, right? Like, oh, I can't even focus on this. No judgment. You're just going to say, okay, let me bring this back to, I'm going to focus on my breathing again. And you just have to practice, I think.
It's the act of mindfulness and being aware and being mindful of how shallow is my breathing? Am I breathing deeply? If you're an individual that notices shallow breaths because of high levels of anxiety, one effective breathing skill and technique that you can do at any moment, you could take it with you if you're in the car, if you're at the crib, if you're in a room filled with people, no matter where you're at, and you can practice it in that moment. And this connects your mind to your body and it just slows everything down. It's 4-4-8 breathing. 4-4-8 or 4-8-4?
I think it's 4-4-8. No, it's 4-8-4 because you hold it.
4-8-4. 4-8-4 breathing. Counselors are amazing. Social support, informational support as well. Okay, so 4-8-4 breathing. The technique is used. Do you want to be my demonstrator? For those of you who are watching, you're going to get a visual of that. If you're listening on the podcast, take a moment and practice this breathing right now so that you can get a feel for what it feels like. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a deep inhale. When you take a really deep breath, you really want to focus on your diaphragm and opening up your lungs. Okay, so we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds. I'm going to count those seconds for you. Then you're going to hold your breath for 8 seconds. Just do your best to just sit there in the moment and hold it. And then we're going to blow out an audible exhale. Really empty your lungs with all that air for 4 seconds.
I got my mic ready.
Carli's going to be breathing into the mic, so just prepare. All right, so if you're driving, pull over or do this when you stop the car. And just close your eyes and just engage. So we're going to inhale for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 8 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then exhale for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Honestly, I feel better. Really.
What you may notice physiologically is that your shoulders are going to drop. You may notice that your breath is going to slow down a little bit. and that your brain may give you a moment to just like relax instead of having ruminating and racing thoughts. Do that a couple of times, and you can do that at any moment. And that's really going to allow you a second to connect your mind and your body.
Progressive muscle relaxation is a good one too. That might be good for someone with anxiety because it allows you to, like someone that can't sit still. You tense up certain parts of your body. You start from like your head or your toes, and you noticeably tense up like my feet, and then you relax, and then you tense, and then you relax. And so that's meant to kind of be the same, along the same lines of like breathing techniques and bringing you back to your breath. And if you drift away, it's okay. You just have to notice that and then bring it back.
Mm-hmm. And so how, if somebody wanted to practice the like squeezing really hard, how long would you encourage them to like hold and be really tense within their body before they release?
Just like a few, probably like 5 seconds, right?
I think that makes sense. And so essentially what that type of technique does is it forces you to draw your attention to where you're feeling tense in your body and then intentionally release that pressure so that you can just really get in tune with your body, and it really allows you to tune into a body scan, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one other thing that really happens when you are not intentionally connecting your mind and your body is that you are detaching yourself from your emotions and your feelings. And so this can really create a consistent pattern of avoidance, and avoidance can really develop and evolve into having a mental breakdown. It can really evolve into depression. It can evolve into having a lack of support because you're not able to be your full self. And in turn, people around you can't connect with you on an emotional and personal level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, something like even I avoidant, yes. What about like negative thoughts too? Negativity.
Elaborate on
Dun,
that.
dun, dun.
Oh, yeah.
So I am reading this book by Dr. Joe Dispenza. He is like a guru for all things mind and body connection. He's pretty amazing. So you guys should check him out if you don't know who he is. But he talks about like actually a technique for writing down your negative thoughts. So like metacognition, I think is what it is. But seeing the thoughts written down, it's kind of like a laid out, tangible, example of your excuses. And so it allows you to look at them and kind of, become aware of them. It forces your awareness, essentially. And so people always talk about like writing down positive things, positive affirmations, which is great. But if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel those warning signs of the mind and body disconnect, that's a way for you to really just have it all out on paper and become aware of it and begin that work to start a more positive connection with your mind and body. I think when we see like the negative things that we say in our head all day, it can make it real.
Yeah. And really the language that you use with yourself is extremely important. So if your internal dialogue is degrading yourself or telling yourself all the things that you can't do, or, oh, I can't make it to this workout because I just want to relax, or I'm too sore, or I don't need to work out. I don't need to move my body. I don't need to do those things just because really I don't want to. Mm-hmm. It really does impact the way that you step into your world and step into how you talk to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It impacts how you talk to the people around you as well as how you're able to receive language from other people.
Yeah. Dr. Joe Dispenza, he talks about like how your thoughts influence your choices, right? Obviously, we think, we choose. That choice turns into a behavior, right? Then that behavior becomes an experience. From that experience, we feel, we get emotions, right? And so it's kind of that like train of thought, I guess, or train of thought and action. But it's kind of that train. I mean, that shows the mind body connection right there and kind of the progression of it. But it just shows how impactful our thoughts are. I mean, if you can change, if you wake up and all you're thinking about is your problems for the day, I mean, guess what? That's probably going to be your focus for most of the day.
Yeah. That makes me think of if you're an individual who benefits from like visuals or something that you can like tangibly envision. One way to think of it is think about your body being your house. So in your house, you go through, you're living, you're eating food, you're changing your clothes, you're using stuff, and you're just placing things down. Let's make believe that you're an individual who doesn't put things up. For some of us, it's less difficult than the others, but let's imagine that when you use something, you put it down in your house and you leave it where it's at. And in order to avoid dealing with like cleaning it or folding your laundry or any of that, you just kind of like leave it alone. Over time, there's a buildup that happens to where now there's clutter all over the kitchen. There's cups all over the kitchen, in the sink. There's pots and pans on the stove. There's clothes on the floor, pillows on the couch on the floor in the living room. There's just straight up clutter. And over time, that can look like the presence of hoarding, right? So it's just like filled. And if we never declutter or address whatever type of mess we have, then that's going to really pour into our way of like avoiding those type of issues or avoiding cleaning up your mess.
Essentially.
And so if you're going through life and you're never clearing up what emotions you experience, whether that be negative ones or whatever type of traumatic events, then that stuff is going to build up until you get to a point to where you just can no longer live in that house, aka you can no longer live in that body. So that's why it's so important to declutter your house, declutter your body and your brain, and only input things that are really going to build you as an individual and allow you to organize your life effectively.
That's a word.
Was that a visual?
I like that visual. I've never heard that before. But that makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't let your house get like that, would you?
Unless you hoard. But that's what I'm saying. Like if you just leave stuff there for so long, something is going to develop. A physical illness, like you said, heart disease, all of that.
Right.
Mental illnesses, there's so many other, mental illnesses outside of like depression, anxiety, PTSD. But so those are just some of the main ones that individuals are familiar with, and they develop over time. So, all right, cool. So that is what we encourage you guys to do. All right, let's spitball. We're going to name 3 ways that people can stimulate their mind. And then we're going to name 3 things that people can stimulate their physical experience.
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1. How could you stimulate your mind?
3, 2, 1. Reading. Learning, reading, learning, conversations with others, seeking different perspectives, listening to podcasts.
Hello, somebody.
Listening to audiobooks. Okay, I just started doing that. So like if you're like, I don't have time to read, audiobooks. Major key.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, me.
3 things. Go.
Well, you kind of did list 6.
I went above and beyond. I didn't know what the format was, so I went all out.
A couple things that maybe were not mentioned. To be honest, I do watch YouTube videos that are educational. Med Circle is one that's specifically about mental health, and there's various individuals who have disorders on there, how they deal with those, how they make sure that they're healthy, even psychologists, psychiatrists, all of that. Go to YouTube. There's a lot of stuff on there that will educate you. Read 10 pages a day of a book. There's this guy that talks about 75 hard. You go really hard for 75 days and it completely changes your life. One of those habits is reading 10 pages a day. Lastly, I would say to join groups of people who do what you want to do and you're not doing it. Be around people who can fulfill your mental space with the stuff that you just haven't been exposed to yet.
Yep. You know what? That made me think of something. I think we can sum all of that up by saying a way to stimulate your mind and your body is to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To make change is not comfortable, right? So when you're stimulating your mind and body and you're feeling a sense of, I don't know if this is right, or this is new for me. I'm not sure about this.
Or
this feels kind of weird. Yes.
I want to stop doing this. This is hard.
Yes.
Keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Keep doing it. So, all right, give me 3 ways to stimulate your physical body with movement.
I mean, exercise, right? That's kind of that's the general thing that we think of.
Yeah.
But again, doing it when you don't want to do it, I think is huge. Because a lot of the time it's your mind telling you, oh, you need more sleep. You can do it later. Later may never come. Mm-hmm. So you just got to get past that and make a choice to do it. But exercise, yoga is great. Tai Chi, I was reading, is great for mind-body connection.
Specific one.
I know. I was like, I don't even know what Tai Chi is, but I may want to learn. I think it's like the thing that you see at the park, people doing at the park when they're like
movement, yoga movement, and karate. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. One fun one is dance. Move that body. Wake up in the morning and turn on a YouTube video and just dance. Or turn on your music and just dance. Move your body. Get into it. Feel how it feels to move, flow, all of the good stuff. Go on mindful walks. Go out in your nature and just listen. Don't play your music for 5-10 minutes. And just listen to your surroundings. That's a big one. And the last one that I would encourage doing, which is really fun and it taps into your childhood, is ride a bike.
Shred
on a Sunday morning. It's really dope. Go to spin, ride a bike in your neighborhood. Do that. Just do something every day. Don't make your mood a requirement on if you move your body.
Mm-hmm. That's a word. That's good.
All right. So we are going to wrap this podcast up with a couple of questions from you guys on the Instagrams at Deanna Bledsoe and at Darina Bledsoe. We polled you guys, asked a couple of questions about how you move your body. Where do you struggle within that? And so we are going to ask Carli how to do that, how to answer these questions.
Let's go.
Okay. First one. How can you tell that there is a disconnect between my mind and body?
Well, I think if you obviously if something feels off, right? Something physically, maybe if you feel a lack of purpose, right? If you, if you're just feeling, I'm going through my daily routine. I'm not getting enjoyment out of anything I'm doing. I'm wondering why I'm here, why I'm going to work every day, right? What is the purpose of all of this? If you're feeling empty, if you're feeling lonely,
feeling hopeless and helpless.
Yes. If something feels off, and that's so easy to say because you might wake up and be like, oh, I just feel off today. But you really I think that's where that intuition comes in. And you really explore why, what are the reasons behind this?
Yeah. I agree with all of that. Your body's going to tell you exactly how you feel. And so it's our responsibility to listen. So if you can tell that your mind and body is disconnected, then try some of the things that we had just mentioned with stimulating your mind. Try some of the things that we just mentioned with stimulating your body and do it consistently. 10 minutes each day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you'll see the change. Okay, next question. How do you how can past trauma affect your mind and body?
Well, we already talked about Amy and how she's so reactive and she can keep us in that reactive state. I think that's really where, people are like, well, okay, it happened 20 years ago. Why don't you get over it? It's not like that. That is not the answer. It's not that simple. It's a built-in neural pathway that is a part of our brain when we go through trauma. So it's not as simple as getting over it. It can show up in so many different ways. They're still doing research on like the full scope of how trauma affects the brain because we don't understand everything yet. But from what they do understand, they know that there is a brain component in the effects of trauma. And I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. So acknowledge the type of pain that you've experienced in the past, be intentional about tending to that and rehabilitating it. Acknowledgement is the key to getting through past trauma and spending time on it without any judgment.
And if you don't know how to do that yourself, seek professional help. Things like EMDR, Deanna's certified in that. I mean, it's crazy when you hear it and you think, how could that work? But it does. It works wonders. It's a combination of physical touch and reprocessing through guidance from a counselor, someone who's certified to do it. So I think, people may not know where to start, especially if it is a trauma that's been, weighing on them for so long. So seeking professional help is a must.
Yeah. And to give you an idea what EMDR is, it's eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So what you do in a nutshell is if you have past trauma that has not been worked through, no matter how long ago it was, then you are able to connect with an EMDR trained or certified counselor, and they will guide you through bilateral stimulation. It could just be like tapping hands back and forth, tapping your feet, or even with the tactile senses. And what you do essentially is, let's say all of your trauma is thrown into a cabinet and it's just like everywhere. It's just like not organized at all. And so what EMDR does is it allows you to effectively organize that trauma, pull it out and place it where it needs to go. And to where, like, if you open a drawer, it's not just all the trauma isn't just gonna fly everywhere. So what it does is once you open the drawer, it's placed where you need it to be placed at. And when you're in moments where the trauma is coming up for you, you create a container so that you can compartmentalize and you can tend to those stressful situations when you have a safe space to do that. Instead of it just coming up and you not knowing what to do with it, and it shows up in your relationships and how you react, all of that. So EMDR allows you to organize that file cabinet so that when it's time for you to access a trauma that happened at 6 years old or at 20 years old, then you can effectively pull it out and then put it back in without everything coming out.
Nice.
There's that. Okay. Last one, how can you tell that you are doing it right in terms of the mind-body connection? You're like stimulating both. How do you know that it's working?
Well, I think it kind of comes down to it being a conscious effort and being comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think you're doing it right when, you're not going to feel great all the time, but when you wake up with intention and you can, look at yourself in the mirror and make that choice, regardless of what's going on that day, like you mentioned, regardless of what's going on with your mood. You're not always going to feel like doing what you need to do, reading those 10 pages, going to your class for exercise, riding a bike. I think you're doing it right when you can put those excuses behind you and start thinking and really focusing on incorporating those thoughts on purpose into your everyday life and your thinking patterns.
Yeah, facts. I would say also, like, you can tell that you're doing it right when it feels good.
Mm-hmm. Simply.
Even if it's hard, it feels good. So that can include feeling grounded, to having moments of grounding yourself when anxiety's running high, when you're feeling off, tending to your body and listening to it. That's how you know that you're doing it right. So, yes, that's essentially it.
That's it.
That's it. So we hope you guys enjoyed this episode, Mind Body Connection, and we hope that you learned something here. We love that you guys are listening and that you're watching on YouTube. If you guys do have any questions, please comment. If you're on YouTube, comment below. Let us know what topics you want to hear. Let us know what your thoughts are, and if you had any experiences with the mind-body connection or disconnect within it. Carli, where can they find you on social media?
At Smashed Potatoes with a Z on the end.
You guys can reach us at our website is www.bloodsoempowered.com. That is where, if you want to get your own journal, guided journal, where it just like goes into detail about these goodies, go there. You can get it. We've got limited amount, but we want to send you one. So you can purchase it there. Also, you can get it or just follow me on my Instagram at Deanna Bledsoe. And Darina's, who will be back next week, is at Darina Bledsoe. Like, share, comment, all of that good stuff. Thank you guys for joining. Thanks, Carl.
Thanks for having me.